All right, Angela, I think we're ready to get started. Good morning. My name is John Donadio. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Association of Counties, and I want to welcome you to our second in a series of non-COVID related virtual workshops. This one is entitled Implementing Infrastructure Investments at the County Level, where you will hear from our friends at the National Association of Counties about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was signed into law in November of 2021 that will make a significant amount of money. And you're going to hear about how much and grants available for capital construction, roads, bridges, and much, 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 much more. But before I make our introductions and take care of some housekeeping, I just want to welcome the association's president, Monmouth County Administrator Terry O'Connor, to say a few words. So, Madam President, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making the time to join us today. It's our intent this year to provide some, as John said, non-COVID related learning opportunities, and certainly infrastructure investments are on the top of everyone's list as our infrastructure ages in New Jersey. So again, thank you for making the time, and let's hear from our experts. Thanks, John.
Great, thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. A couple of housekeeping items. This course has been approved for continuing education credits in budgeting, financial and debt management, and fiscal operations. So if you'd like to receive, that's 1 hour of credit in CMFO and CCFO, please see Lauren in our office. If you have any questions throughout the workshop, we'll do our best to get to them probably at the end, but please put them in the Q&A icon on the bottom of the screen and not your chat box. So with that, I am pleased to introduce our friends from the National Association of Counties. They do an amazing job. I can't say enough positive things about the work that they've done, particularly throughout COVID, and just being an incredible resource. And no matter how busy they are, and it could be 11 or 12 o'clock at night, I will get an email back from Mark or Jessica or Matt, who I know unfortunately couldn't join us today, but just I can't, again, say enough great words. And if your county isn't a member of the National Association of Counties, and I think we're up to 15 now, I would strongly recommend that you do so, because again, just an invaluable resource. And I'll give you one more plug, Mark and Jessica. They have a terrific annual conference this year. It's in Colorado, so make sure to visit their website for additional details. And again, just full of resources, and you get to network with your county peers from across the state of New Jersey. So with that, I am pleased to, and you probably met Mark Rataco before at our annual conference back in October last year. Mark is the Chief Government Affairs Officer for the National Association of Counties, and I can rely on him a great deal. So you're going to hear from Mark, and both Jessica Jennings, also with the National Association of Counties, and is their Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act guru, and took the time a couple of weeks ago to meet with me and really provide a comprehensive overview of some of the funding that is available. So with that, thank you again for being here today. I appreciate it a great deal, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark and Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for the kind introduction, the kind words about the National Association of Counties. Did part of my job for me, which is to remind folks about our annual conference coming up in July of this year, and about all the resources beyond just infrastructure that the National Association of Counties provides. All of those are on our website at NACo.org. If you want to take a look during this presentation that we're going to put up on the screen, there'll be little codes called QR codes that you'll be used to if you've ordered food at a restaurant recently or anywhere else. You can just scan the codes with your phone as I'm talking, or of course, we'll provide this presentation afterwards, and it will take you to the resources on NACo.org that we're referring to. So kicking off here, as you're seeing on the screen, the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, IIJA, was signed into law in November 2021. And coupled with the American Rescue Plan Act, which you're all familiar with, the two bills together are really the largest sort of domestic investment in local governments that we've ever seen.
Mark, are you
yes.
seeing the right slides, or
Yes,
are you seeing the presenter view?
Nope, I'm seeing the right. We're good.
Okay, cool. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. The largest investment in local governments that we've ever seen, and the American Rescue Plan Act is its own thing. It's a little simpler in some ways because it was a direct investment in every county in America. It was just a check from Treasury. The rules were a bit complicated, but it was a direct allocation. With the infrastructure law, it's a little bit different. Most of the funds are going to be competitively awarded. Much of the funding goes through the states, and none of it is in that same direct to counties formula that the American Rescue Plan Act was. So again, the QR code you see at the bottom here goes to our analysis of the bill. It's sort of the narrative description. But the next QR code you're going to see is for a table that is very useful. It is without the narrative descriptions, just the list of programs that counties are eligible to apply to and when you're able to apply to them. And Jessica will talk a lot about those in a couple minutes, but just wanted to give you those resources ahead of time. So this law is seen, of course, as a transportation law, which is where most of the funding was, but there was also funding that came through other federal agencies such as EPA, USDA, HHS, and very importantly for the Northeast and other places, the Department of Commerce, which has significant funding to improve broadband infrastructure. So the first and largest pot of money is transportation funding. And so I'm going to kick it over to Jessica Jennings to go through the transportation part of this legislation and how counties can access that money. But let me first say that Jessica is basically the foremost expert in this funding as it relates to counties. She created that table that you saw on the last slide and that we'll reference throughout this presentation. So we'll put our emails in the chat as we're talking, but she is, aside from listening to her right now, is always a resource to go to on these transportation matters. She's a resource for me, certainly, and it's a pleasure to work with her every day. So I'll kick it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Mark, for the very gracious introduction. So as Mark said, this is largely thought of as a transportation bill, and you see that big chunk of blue right there in the circle, and that represents US DOT's funding versus everyone else's. So let's talk a little bit more about the DOT dollars. Of that 550 billion, and we really focus on 550 because it's the new investments in the bill. You may have heard 973 billion, and that's really the total investments over 5 years. You may have heard 1.2 trillion. That's also correct. That's just over 8 years. But we're really going to talk about the 550 billion, which is over 5 years and is new investments. So of that, over 50% went to transportation, about 284 billion. And counties can access these funds in the following ways. Now, these are not specific to transportation. This is the way counties can access any funds in the overall law. So first of all, as Mark mentioned, those competitive opportunities, which are really our bread and butter as far as the infrastructure bill goes. We also get transit formulas. Those flow to designated recipients. Rural areas, those flow to the states. We have loans and loan guarantees. You may be familiar with the TIFIA program, which finances US DOT projects. WIFIA is water, it's very similar. There's also a new CFIA program in this bill that deals with carbon capture. And then also we received some sub-allocations from state formulas, the formula funding that they get. Mark also referenced the vast majority of transportation funds, at least, go to state DOTs first before we ever see it. And those are through those core federal aid highway formulas. So again, back to the competitive resources, there's almost I actually think it's a little over 100 billion over 5 years for state and local governments, which we're really excited about. So to talk specifically about New Jersey, I wanted to start first with the Bridge Formula Program. And you may be asking why I'm starting with the program where the money went to the states. But I think this is good information for you to be armed with as you talk to your state DOTs, et cetera. So 5.5 billion annually over 5 years for this new program, really important to us. And we're really excited that, we feel like Congress listened to us and they are creating new off-system bridge set-asides as they move forward with more bridge investments. And this is a great example of that. So 15% off-system bridge set-aside, that's new. And in addition to the Surface Transportation Block Grant set-aside, and beyond the 15% requirement that states have to invest in those, there's a 100% federal cost share incentive where states can basically, do these projects at no cost. So we think that's a pretty good argument when you're advocating for your local bridges with state DOTs. So what that program looks like in New Jersey, you can see over to the left, 209 for the main bridges, 36.9 million for off-system bridges, and that totals 246 million for the state of New Jersey in FY22. So actually, before I move forward, I want to bring your attention to that, to that 80.2 million number you see there. So combined off-system bridge resources in FY22 for New Jersey is now 80.2 million. To put that into perspective, it's almost 150% higher than what you had last year, which was through that 15% off-system bridge set aside within the block grant only. So 150% increase, I believe, of the state associations I've done is the largest one I've seen so far. Then I want to talk briefly about those sub allocations I mentioned. You're probably familiar with the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. It sub allocates 55% of total funding based on population. Now, of course, you likely know that this money does not flow straight to a county. It flows to a metropolitan planning organization, a regional transportation planning organization, but obviously county officials, local officials make up these boards, and this is how regional and local projects are built. You'll notice within the block grant, there are 2 new bands, which we're really excited about because this will help us gather more data on where state DOTs are really spending this money and where they're building projects, because only areas or MPOs of 200,000 and above really have that project selection authority. And then, there's some rules and states must consult, et cetera, with the other bands, but we know that that doesn't always go as is required by statute. So this will help us shed a little bit more light onto that. So in FY22, 163 million is available for sub-allocation in the state of New Jersey, and that's about 11% increase over last year. There is a new program that is one of those federal aid highway programs that flows through formulas to state DOTs that also has a sub-allocation requirement. It does flow in those same population bands that we just talked about for STBG, though an important part about this program is the areas between basically 50,000 to 200,000, they also have obligation authority. So like I just mentioned, an STBG 200,000 and above, this program 50,000 and above will have project selection authority in this new program. 19.3 million is available for sub-allocation through the carbon reduction program in New Jersey in FY22. It's kind of ironic, this program is almost in conflict with the Surface Transportation Block Grant because eligible projects are restricted to those that reduce transportation emissions. And of course, the block grant is super flexible to allow you to build all kinds of surface transportation projects. So now let's talk about the opportunities that are really for counties. Again, we've got this bright QR code up here. You'll find it throughout this presentation, and it will take you again to the funding table. So these are just little snippets of the table, but if you visit the site, you'll see the bipartisan infrastructure law funding table. The larger table has every piece of information that we feel like you need to apply, including, the program name, the agencies, the sub-agencies, the description, the funding levels. How does a county access this? So do I apply through DOT? Do I need to apply through, a state water revolving loan fund, et cetera? We have special eligibility requirements. So say a county is eligible, but not just any county, the county must be outside of an urbanized area, et cetera. You'll find that information there. And then the longer snippet there, the rectangle, is little cards, and they pop up on our website when the notices of funding are made available by federal agencies. So as soon as the funds are available, they will appear on our website, and you'll be able to click directly from our website to the notice of funding where you'll be able to apply. So we hope that's helpful. And yes, there is almost $8 billion available right now that counties can access. It's either counties or a local public agency or a sector of county government. So to look at the transportation BIL funding, you also really need to look at the FY22 appropriations bill that was just signed in March. The appropriations bill had several unique effects on the bipartisan infrastructure law, including it authorized federal agencies to fully stand up some of the new programs that were prevented from being established by the continuing resolution that we were operating under. All in all, the bipartisan infrastructure law adds about $37 billion to US DOT's resources in FY22 alone. This is true outside of DOT as well. Many other programs were also increased. I've taken a little snippet here of different sub-administrations from DOT and major programs within those to show you just how much funding is available this year. The RAISE grants, which actually are open right now but close tomorrow, they got $1.5 billion from the infrastructure law, an additional $775 million from the omnibus, for a total of $2.3 billion in FY22, and that's about 130% more than that FY21 level you can also see there. And I won't go through all these, but just call your attention to that last column with the percentage changes, which I think really tells the story about how much more resources are really out there right now for these different projects, especially those consolidated rail improvements or consolidated rail infrastructure safety improvement grants. Chrissy, up almost 335% over FY21. So here's again a little table of the open notices of funding. This is not all of the open notices. I believe it's all but maybe 2. Again, the QR code, please go there. You can find all of them that are available to counties. You are not going to find, opportunities that are available to states. It really is meant to be kind of a one-stop shop for county officials as you look to and try to decipher, this complex law. So before I move on from this slide, I do want to just mention that those infra grants, mega grants, and rural service transportation block grant, DOT has certainly heard from us about how difficult it is to apply. And they have done a wonderful thing, we think, which is consolidating all 3 of those opportunities into one, and you can apply for all 3 using one grant application. And we know just how costly those applications can be, how complex, the level of expertise needed, often, capacity is not there, et cetera. And this is really meant to alleviate, some of those concerns. Those bottom 2 opportunities open for bus grants. Those are also a consolidated opportunity you can apply for using just one application. So these are the things open now, and many are coming. So because we just, again, got the appropriations bill back in March, finally signed, many of the programs relied on the appropriations bill. And so this is just kind of a snippet of upcoming programs. Some of these are available to states, but many of them are available to counties as well. I would bring your attention to that bridge investment program, much anticipated NOFO that we expect to see in May. That railroad crossing elimination program, also exciting, and later this summer. And then just a few more programs that we expect to see throughout summer and into early fall. So really excited about those and happy to take any questions at the end on any of these. And before I turn it back over to Mark to kind of highlight some highlights from other portfolios, I wanted to put this slide up because, we know that it can be difficult to access these funds for several different reasons, right? So just wanted to give a snippet of DOT resources that are out there right now. They're doing an amazing job of putting out technical assistance and other local support. The US DOT Routes Initiative is really geared towards rural counties to help rural counties apply for funding. Of course, you're probably familiar with the local technical assistance program. The Build America Bureau, if you're not familiar with that, they have about $100 billion available right now to finance infrastructure projects. I find a lot of folks just don't even know about them, but it is, low rate loans. This is TIFIA. This is the railroad, the RIF. I know the acronym better than I know what it stands for, but the railroad rehabilitation infrastructure financing, I believe. And then also a really healthy series of webinars on how to apply, benefit cost analysis. I mean, really in-depth stuff. So I appreciate our partners, of course, at DOT and throughout the agencies. But Mark, I'll turn it over to you to discuss some of the other portfolios that are in the bill.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And as I said, Jessica is really the expert in DC on this. She made the table that we keep referencing, and we think it's going to be a great resource, and already is a great resource to counties. So I really encourage you to look into that. The bill itself, though, was more than just transportation. It was truly a holistic approach to modernizing our infrastructure. And I'm from the Northeast. I'm from Connecticut. I was born in New York. I have my Yankees hat right here that I wear when I'm not doing presentations. And I know, and you know, that aging water infrastructure is a huge concern for older counties, older cities, and older communities. And this bill provides almost $30 billion for clean water and drinking water state revolving funds over 5 years. And a particular problem in the Northeast and elsewhere in the northern half of the country is lead drinking water pipes. And it provides $15 billion over 5 years to replace those lead service lines. Many of you might live in houses with those lead service lines. I did when I lived in Washington, D.C. It also provides funding to address emerging contaminants and PFAS, which are these chemicals called forever chemicals that are contaminating our drinking water supply, contaminating our groundwater, and certainly need to be addressed, and sometimes need to be addressed by counties. So on the next slide, continuing on the energy and environment front, there is $5 billion over the course of 5 years to enhance grid resiliency. And you'll see these particular programs in that funding table that Jessica was referencing earlier. Grid resiliency is really important. We saw an example of that about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago in Texas, where they had a cold, winter storm, and there was a cold snap, and their electric grid wasn't able to maintain operation, and unfortunately, people lost their lives due to the cold and conditions. The WAP program, Weatherization Assistance Program, this is a critical program to northeastern states that are hot in the summertime and cold in the wintertime, and then additional energy-related funding for local governments to process batteries for electric vehicles. And there's also a emphasis, I would say, both in this bipartisan infrastructure law, but also from the department generally, on electric vehicle infrastructure, and the extent to which local governments like counties, cities, and even states will own that electric vehicle infrastructure is something that the Department of Transportation spends a lot of time on. Something that we spend a lot of time on at NACo is broadband. And with the American Rescue Plan Act, which provided $65 billion to every county in America, all of your counties received American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Those funds could be used for broadband. And on top of that, this bill invests another historic amount in broadband, about $60 billion all told for broadband infrastructure. Most of that goes to the states. About $42 billion will go to the states based on a formula. The state of New Jersey will receive billions of dollars in broadband infrastructure money on top of all the other pots of money that we're talking about. And the Department of Commerce is administering this program. And so that's kind of a new thing for the Department of Commerce. If you've gone to NACo events, we are engaging very closely with the Department of Commerce to educate them about the role that counties would play in the deployment of this broadband infrastructure. But on top of the large doesn't even really do it justice. It's a huge amount of money. Over $40 billion for broadband infrastructure. There are smaller pots of money in this bill that seek to get your residents connected to faster and better internet. The first is a $1 billion national program that seeks to invest in middle mile infrastructure. Middle mile is what it sounds like. It's not the generation of internet at a central location, and it's not the last mile, which is the fiber to people's houses. It's those points in between, and those points in between, which can they're so varied on what that type of infrastructure could be. Most of that in most places is county owned. So we see this middle mile program as very much a county connected investment program. It also very importantly, and I say importantly because NACo helped write the language, it authorizes the new state and local cybersecurity grant program. As more county operations move online, as people are working from home, as county employers are working from home, cybersecurity is so critical. And this grant program would allow for local governments to access direct funding for cybersecurity, and we really think that it's a very much a needed program, but B, we're very happy about it because it has that direct to local element to it. And then it also invests in something called the Affordability Connectivity Fund. This fund used to be called the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. So you might know it as that, the EBB program. They changed the name to the Affordability Connectivity Fund, which I would suggest is a less catchy name, but is a better program because it allows your residents better options in choosing broadband. And what it essentially does is it gives those residents who are eligible a subsidy for broadband. The old EBB program was also a subsidy, but it was very limited in its options. This Affordability Connectivity Fund allows your residents to get the broadband subsidy. I think it's $60 a month. It might be 30 though, so I'm sorry, I don't know the details on it. It's some nominal amount of money a month that they could go to the internet service provider and basically pick the level of broadband that is best for them. And where counties are involved in this is that the FCC, who administers this program, really needs our help in informing residents about the availability of this program. County officials are seen as trusted partners, trusted information providers in their community. So the FCC asks that when you're out in your community talking to people about broadband and broadband connectivity, you let your lower income residents know about this broadband subsidy program. And then finally, $2 billion for the USDA Rural Utility Service, the Reconnect program, which is basically a rural broadband program. So on the next slide, you'll see there is money for resilience, and New Jersey knows well the importance of resilience funding as we've been hit by hurricanes and Superstorm Sandy, of course. It provides $500 million over 5 years for the Storm Act, which is basically a pre-disaster mitigation funding, $1 billion for the BRIC program, which is also pre-disaster mitigation funding, and then $3.5 billion for the flood mitigation assistance grants. And these types of funds and these types of programs are really important as we see weather patterns change, as we see the climate change, to signify that there will be more extreme weather events in places that didn't usually have extreme weather events. I actually was reading a story just a few days ago about how there's a town in New Jersey, I'm forgetting the name, that had this ice skating rink that doesn't freeze anymore. And it was sort of the harbinger of how New Jersey's climate is changing. And part of that is going to be counties investing in resiliency. And so this bill does that. And then finally, on public lands, of which there is not much in New Jersey, if any, so I'll just talk about it very quickly. For places that have public lands, it invested some money in the U.S. Forest Service and other direct to county funding that has to do with timber harvests, which again, I don't think New Jersey has any piece of, perhaps in one county in northern New Jersey that we'll certainly check on. But other than that, that is basically a summary of the law. And again, we're going to put up the QR code here. I put my email in the chat. I put Jessica's email in the chat, and that QR code will bring you to the full analysis to the extent that we couldn't get to any pieces of the law today. And just really appreciate John's partnership and the New Jersey Association of Counties partnership. John had very nice things to say about us in the beginning, but I would say those right back to him. It's truly a partnership with the New Jersey Association. We view our strength as a national association as the sum of all the state associations, and John is on the leading edge of providing great service to county officials in his state. So I want to thank you, John, for having us. It was a pleasure to be here today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mark and Jessica. That was terrific. And Mark, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it a great deal. And my first question is can we steal you away from NACo, both of you, to come here and help us out in New Jersey with all this great monies that are available for our counties?
Well, with the job market like it is, John, I don't know. don't even, I'm not even going to entertain that. So please don't even talk to Jessica about that. Jessica, you're not allowed to do that.
All right, you got a deal. So can we, I know that you have the code on the website, and the NACo website also has some great, all of this information, but is there a PowerPoint or some other details that you can send to me that I can share with our folks? And then I actually have a couple of questions for everybody that's lining up.
Yeah, well, so I think that we'll share this PowerPoint certainly. The codes that that are in the PowerPoint bring you to the two most important resources. Perhaps as Jessica's answering a question, I will put the direct links to those into the chat so people can have them. And so I think that those are the two best places to start.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, we do have a couple of questions. The first is the Storm Act are loan funds. What are the loan terms?
So when I worked in the Senate, Richard, my boss said, if you don't know something, say, I don't know. And this is one of those times where I don't know. Maybe Jessica does.
No, I don't know either. So and you knew I would not know, Mark, so rude. So let us get back to you on that because obviously one of our colleagues handles that portfolio and we're happy to follow up.
Great. I appreciate you not making up an answer. So that was awesome. So we'll wait to hear back from you because I do that all the time. So the next question is, what is the best way to know how, when, and where this funding is becoming available for distribution, or what the distribution plan is for the various funds?
Sure.
Yeah, so go ahead, Jessica.
Sure. Okay. So I would again point you to the table where we will have, I'm planning to add a column. This is an undertaking, but I'm planning to add a column of like next milestones. But, right now I would point you to the White House has a great state and local guidebook, and it has program by program and the next milestone information. I'm happy to put that in the chat in just a moment. It's really helpful. Some of it though, I will just say the milestone might be like Q3 and FY22. So it's not going to be like it's coming, on a certain date. Some of them we do know are coming, like the ones I put up earlier on the slides, like we know especially when, and we're going to add that information to the website as well. So that'll also be available. So I would just say, keep checking back there. And that's really what that is intended to do, is to keep you updated on those resources. Otherwise, distribution lists, federal agencies is a great way to be aware, although, you'll be aware of everything they do. So it becomes kind of work to sift through all the emails, but to the extent you want to be informed about a certain infrastructure sector, I would definitely say sign up for DOT's emails, things like that.
Great. We've got a couple of more questions. Let's see. I'm going to go in the chat box because I love Kevin. So is the Bridge Investment Program federally funded?
Yes. All the programs that we're talking about today are federally funded.
I just put the guidance for that program in the chat.
And that thank you, Mark, because that guidance includes that language that says the 100% cost incentive for state DOTs to further invest in those bridges with that new money they have through that formula program we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Another question is, what is the best way to address broadband to residents if the county does not own the infrastructure?
That's a great question. So there's a few ways to do that. And I should say that it's not common for counties to own broadband infrastructure. So there's lots of peer knowledge throughout the country that you can draw on in this particular case. So assuming that if the county owns no infrastructure for broadband, which is not atypical, there are a few things you can do. The first, as I said, the state is receiving $1 billion+ and part of the state's funding contingency is that they have to come up with a plan in order to for what to do with that money. And in most states where there's no sort of state or local owned infrastructure for broadband, what the states are doing is they're partnering with a huge internet service provider. So in our area, Verizon, Comcast, the state will go to those internet service providers and say, here's who needs internet service and here's who doesn't have it. The first part of that is mapping. So there are things that counties can do with ARP funds, for instance, or funds in this bill to really diligently map the internet service that's available to residents right now. And then the state, of course, will do that as well. And they will go to that provider and say, on a house by house level, say, this is who has internet and who doesn't, and here's who we need to bring into greater speeds or greater access. The other thing that you can do is let those residents know, and let me go back to the question as I'm talking. Broadband, so I assume you mean broadband access to residents in that question. The other thing you can do is that if they have, if broadband is available to them in their communities, they just can't afford it, there's that subsidy program I talked about. So there's really two different problems. And in New Jersey, I would imagine that most of the problem, unlike some of the most rural parts of America, the problem is more affordability than physical access. And so let's just, assuming that that's the case in your particular case, I know that's not the case everywhere in New Jersey, but there is that affordability connectivity program that will give residents a subsidy for broadband. Now, in the case where there is no infrastructure, the access to that broadband doesn't exist, that's a time when you'll partner with your state or you'll use your ARP funds to partner with a provider to expand access to those residents.
So thank you, Mark. There's two more questions related to the broadband, and I'll put them together. Is there funding for broadband feasibility studies done by counties? And the question was related to broadband in relation to speed or accessibility. So I think you might have.
Yeah, well, let me talk about that second part, because the law is quite ambitious about speed. So just brief history on speed. The current definition of high-speed internet is 25 megabits download, 3 megabits upload. You'll see that as written as 25.3. 25.3 is not a very fast connection. None of you are probably on a connection that slow. We wouldn't be able to have this meeting at 25.3, certainly not the 3 side, maybe the 25 side. If you did a speed test right now and your internet's plugged into the wall and you live in the Northeast, you're in the hundreds upload, hundreds download, probably. So one of the issues here is that the common definition of high-speed internet is not correct. 25.3 is not high-speed internet. So what this law attempted to do was raise that threshold to say that 100 download and 100 upload symmetrical is the new definition of high-speed internet. Generally, it's what we're aspiring to. However, if you can't get there, 100 download, 20 upload is what you should shoot for. So when we talk about people who don't have access to internet, when we're talking about ARP funds and talking about bipartisan infrastructure law funds, the universe of people that don't have access to high-speed internet are those below that 120 threshold. But the current definition is 25.3. So I hope that clears up the access speed question. And then the second one was, sorry, John, let me go look. Feasibility studies, yes. So I'll have to look. I don't think there's direct funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law for a feasibility study, but the states could do a feasibility study. And I know several states are. South Carolina is one example of that. North Carolina is an example of that, that are using their state money to conduct a statewide mapping. Michigan is another statewide mapping project. But you as the county could use your American Rescue Plan Act dollars to do your own, and it wouldn't be called a feasibility study, it would be called a broadband mapping study. And there's also other federal activities that are attempting to do this. The FCC is attempting to make its own map. And I think this would be a great time to plug one of NACo's initiatives. It's called the Test It app, TESTIT, Test It. And it's an app on your iPhone. Download the app, hit test, and you'll get your Wi-Fi speed. It will show up on your phone. It will say, this is your speed where you are. That data goes into a central repository that is administered by the federal government, NTIA in this case, and they are using that NACo Test It data to corroborate and to create these nationwide maps. So there's several mapping initiatives underway, but to answer your question directly, the state could use its bipartisan infrastructure law funds to undergo a mapping study, and I would imagine they're actually required to do so, or at the county level, you could use your ARP dollars to do your own.
Great, thank you, Mark. I don't think we have any other questions, but I do. Is there, if you don't mind, is there anything that we can do at the county level, at the association level, let me rephrase that. Is there anything the state can do to make us aware or to kind of facilitate counties applying for this funding? Are there any steps that they have to take or that we should encourage them to take?
Yeah, well, I think that the states are having a very similar conversation that we're having right now. I would imagine that there's a funding table related to the one that Jessica made that states have made. And so, Jessica, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that. And, the other thing is that we are constantly attempting to forge partnerships with states. So NJAC is the national association related to that is our sort of our brother and sister organization whose members are governors. And so at NACo, we're always trying to forge those connections with states. And I see in the chat that my colleague Kim Hall mentioned that NACo will be at NJAC's annual conference next month. And so that's a place to stop by, talk to us about how we can coordinate with different levels of government. We have sort of open lines of communication, of course, with the federal government. We talk to the White House and DOT every day, but we also talk to like NLC every day, the National League of Cities, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National Governors Association. So we view NACo as kind of the conduit for those kind of conversations. And Kim Hall will be at your conference next month, so we can dive into like specific connections that you all would like to make.
Yeah, Mark, I would just add, as far as just advice for applying, especially, again, I know I focus a lot on transportation since that's what I know the most about, but safety in numbers, right? Like if a county's going to apply, look at the counties around you, look at the cities in the county, try to apply as more than just one entity. That's always going to make your application more favorable because obviously you're demonstrating the public benefit, right? Just by the fact that you have the buy-in of more than just, one area. So that's just a piece of advice I would include.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions. So before I turn it back over to our president, Terry O'Connor, I just want to again thank Mark and Jessica for doing a fantastic job and being just a terrific resource for me and county governments across the entire country. So just great job. And I look forward to seeing you in May at our conference and then again in July in Colorado at your conference. So Terry.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks, John. Mark and Jessica, thank you. That was a really terrific presentation. I can tell you as a county official, sometimes these funding opportunities, it's a lot of money, but it seems daunting. Like, how do we even start the process? So I think you gave us some really helpful information. I think the tables will really be instrumental to us in understanding. So thank you so very much and look forward to seeing you at our conference next month. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Great. Have a great, we'll make sure to make this I forgot to mention this. We'll make sure to have this video posted on our website. We're getting a lot of questions about it and direct you to the NACo's website if you didn't get it off the chat box. So thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.